All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're here going to be giving out this webinar on digitally securing your nonprofit's mission. It's going to keep rolling through here. We do have a kind of a tight timeline here. So I'm Michael Sage. I'm the owner and operator of Sage 497 Consulting, which is a strategic organization that focuses on security, technology, and business operations for state and local government, nonprofits, and small businesses. And I'll let Brian introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. Brian Mahon. I'm a business owner and operator here at Igloo Insurance. I live in Lititz, Pennsylvania. We're based out of Middletown. We do business, life, home, and auto. And I've kind of grown a reputation in the insurance industry, nicknamed as Cyber Guy Bry. October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and I often do numerous speaking engagements around the topic just to educate various industries and groups of people. So happy to be here.
Great, thank you, Brian. And yeah, really happy to get this presentation underway, given it is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and this is very much a hot topic. So just to kind of run through our agenda very quickly here, I'm going to talk a little bit about framing the challenge that nonprofits face, technology trends and needs, practices, strategies, and tips, and the value a fractional leader can bring to nonprofit organizations of varying sizes. Then Brian's going to talk about some cyber insurance, the issues, and navigating and best practices associated with it. So again, we're going to dive right into this. So I work with a lot of state and local government and nonprofits, and a lot of the challenges that nonprofits face is limited resources, whether that be budget, staffing, time, all the above are time restraints on you and how you run your nonprofits. Obviously, depending on the size of your organization, you may not have expertise internally on cybersecurity. You may have one or two resources, a handful of resources that are technology-focused individuals, break fix, or if you're maybe a larger nonprofit, or if you're lucky to have somebody that has a security-minded mindset, that's great, but are they able to focus on cybersecurity? I've talked to a lot of nonprofits, and they may even have volunteer and temporary staff supporting the organization. A lot of your board members are probably volunteers. They have full-time jobs, and if you're a member-based association or organization, they're volunteering their time and resources to you. If you're a community-based nonprofit, again, a lot of volunteer resources and temporary resources that you may or may not be able to support in various ways. So those create problems. Phishing and social engineering is on a rise. Many years ago, when we first started working in technology and cybersecurity over 20 years ago, phishing and social engineering was really focused on larger organizations, large government entities, those different types of things, financial sector. Phishing now is prevalent and has grown beyond belief, and is attacking everyone equally, in my opinion. And especially with the rise of AI, artificial intelligence, phishing and social engineering has become harder and harder to detect than ever before, because the bad actors are able to use those resources and tools to make more sophisticated attacks. A lot of nonprofits use third-party applications and cloud-based services, which is great because you don't have to maintain the applications or try to develop those specialty skill sets in those areas. But that means you're relying on those third parties to provide those services for you, and relying on them to patch and secure and maintain those environments. And as many of you maybe have seen yesterday with the Amazon Web Services, AWS outage, while that wasn't a cybersecurity related incident that anybody's aware of yet, at least that I'm seeing, that does show the dependency on those systems and that impact on you. And as part of that, you have to manage your identity and users' access to those systems. So people coming on board and offboarding, again, those volunteers, and those different things, the access levels within the system, are you managing it based on least privilege? Those things, a lot of times in nonprofits, you end up having staff that wear multiple hats and do 2, 3, 4, 5 different jobs. And that can present some unique challenges to your organization. Incident response and business continuity. Again, those are the things we like to talk about, and a lot of people like to think about and focus on, but actually having the time to do those things is a luxury in many people's minds. So that's kind of framing some of the operational challenges and organizational challenges you may have related to securing your nonprofit's mission. Now, additionally, some of the other column here, you can see some of the threats against you from the bad actor side. You have malware or viruses that disrupt your operations, take your applications offline. They can do a lot of different things, stealing data, taking down your application, manipulating your systems, all those different things. That's what malware and viruses will do for you or do against you. And then you have ransomware. Ransomware is basically a type of virus or malware, but what, as many of you know and have heard about and hopefully have not experienced but may have, is ransomware is a piece of malware that will encrypt all of your data or steal your data, maybe both, and then hold it ransom and hope that you will pay it to get your data back and hope that maybe you don't have recovery processes. And what we're seeing is a rise of ransomware. Used to be, hey, we'll encrypt your data. If you want the keys to unencrypt it, you have to pay to get it back. But now we've seen the rise in double and triple ransom. So they'll hold your data ransom, encrypt it, and then they'll threaten you and say, hey, we also have your data if you don't want us to release your data. And in addition to unencrypting it, if you don't want us to release it, pay us. And now with these, that's double ransom. Now we have also seen a rise of triple ransom. Well, they'll contact the people's data that you stole and say, hey, we got this from XYZ company. If you don't want us to release it, you pay us too. So we're seeing the rise of ransoms taking multiple different approaches and causing all different kind of problems. DDoS or distributed denial of service attacks. The easiest way I can explain this is they flood your network traffic with so much, flood your network with so much traffic, it takes your systems offline and makes it impossible to use. So a lot of times that is, you see that in a lot of different threat areas and different things like that. Phishing, I talked about that a little bit ago, but not just email. Now we're seeing a rise in text phishing. If you've ever gotten those text messages about XYZ bank has transactions, click on the link to report fraud. And we've actually seen a rise on the phone, calling people, and you can apply threats and scare tactics verbally to turn over data or information, things like that, impersonating IT departments, things like that. So the phishing actors, the bad actors, aren't just relying on email anymore. They're taking multi-pronged approaches. Going against your social engineering. So what is your presence out there? Hacking you from those things. What can they learn from you? What can they gain from LinkedIn, social media, different things like that? One of the biggest things that they're after now is account compromise, taking over accounts. And then that way they can impersonate you and then use that as a method to attack others and attack your organization from the inside, because everything they're doing looks like it's coming from you. So they're basically impersonating you, and now they have your access. And then the rise of outdated software. As more and more systems become outdated, technology companies put out patches and updates almost weekly now, it seems like. And if you don't patch them quick enough, fast enough, the bad actors know how to get in there. So a lot of this frames the challenges both from an operational perspective, but also from a threat actor and bad actor standpoint. So what I hope to offer here is some practical tips to help protect and digitally secure your organization and your nonprofit. Practice good password management. Enforce this across your organization. Make sure they're using good, strong passwords, changing them on a regular basis. If you don't have the resources to implement that automatically through your tools, make sure you're doing it manually and educating your users on how to do that manually. Implement multi-factor authentication. So implement those tools within Microsoft or Google or whatever software packages you're using. Implement third-party products like Duo or whatever you need to do. And implement that on every login whenever possible. Yes, it's a little bit annoying to have to go into the authentication app or get the text message with the code, different things like that. But implement that and enforce it across the board. Make sure you're educating your users never to share those codes, just like they would never share their passwords. Make sure that they're involved in those requests. We've seen an increase in users getting phished for those codes and hitting approve when that's not even their login, and then reporting when those things happen. So it goes around to user education, but implement MFA, the multi-factor authentication, and educate your users on that. Researching applications and browser plugins. So don't just install freeware or cheap software whenever you can. Make sure you're understanding what it's being used for, how you're using it, and what the benefits are. For browser plugins, read the terms and conditions, understand what you're getting out of them. Be careful of using password vaults and things like that that may come out of the software packages. Make sure you're understanding what those things are and how you use them. Using AI resources like ChatGPT and Gemini and all those other ones, Copilot, they're great resources. A lot of people use them. I use them. Just make sure you're using it responsibly. Make sure you're getting the protection and privacy that you should be using. Even when you are doing that, be careful of what data you are putting into the system. Make sure you're not putting personal identifiable information or personal health information or anything like that. And thank you, Brian, for the reminder about throwing questions in the chat here. I do appreciate that reminder. So yes, everybody, please throw your questions in the chat anytime throughout the presentation. Updating your software and patching, I mentioned this earlier. Set your Windows to automatically update, or and enforce that, making sure your staff know when, hey, there's an update out there. Make sure you're applying it, enforcing that, monitoring tools, different things like that, to make sure that people are updating the software and your applications, your environment. Talk to those third-party providers. Make sure that they're providing those services. Back up your data whenever you can. Using the backup services and solutions that may be available to you, and make sure that you're having multiple copies online and offline, so that if there would be an incident, you do have the ability to restore. So make sure you're just backing up your data. Phishing education and awareness. I'm not going to run through this, but as I mentioned, phishing has gotten much more sophisticated, and it's becoming harder to detect, but there are still ways to detect it. I think the biggest thing you need to do is educate yourself and others. Take a second before you click to say, is this something I should be doing or reading? Does this person would just send this to me? So why would Bob from manufacturing be sending me an email about taxes? So question that before you open email and validate it. So send a separate email, pick up the phone, call the person. Hey, I wasn't expecting this from you. What is this something that you would send to me? So there's some helpful tips on the screen there, but I think the biggest piece there is just think before you click and then validate when in doubt. And make sure you're going that extra little bit to validate that. Make sure that you have advanced antivirus, advanced threat protection, NDR, XDR in your environment. Yes, some of those tools can be a little bit pricey and things like that, but it really comes down to that defense in depth, making sure you have the antivirus and advanced threat protection and monitoring capabilities throughout your environment. Research for the one that would work best for you. Secure your Wi-Fi in your offices or at your home if you're remote. Make sure you have it set up with privacy and security, and don't openly trust public Wi-Fi whenever you're traveling for work, or if you're working at a Starbucks or a coffee shop or lunch. Make sure you're being very careful about which Wi-Fis you're joining, or if you do need to join a public Wi-Fi, a lot of internet service providers, a lot of antivirus or advanced threat protection companies do offer VPN capabilities as part of their packaged software. Make sure you're using them and your staff are educated on it. And then I'll just jump in here quick before I turn it over to Brian to talk, dive into cybersecurity. Here about the idea of fractional leadership. A lot of nonprofits find it very hard to, again, you have people wearing 2 and 3 and 4 different hats. Your organization may not be big enough to justify hiring a full-time chief information officer or chief security officer. That's where this idea of a fractional leader comes in. You're basically procuring a person that has years and decades worth of experience and partners and has a network of resources available to them that comes in, and they can come in part-time and support your organization from a strategic level or strategy or financial level. So you're getting that expertise, but you're not paying for a full-time resource in that area. Maybe you're getting the resources for 10, 15, 20, 30 hours a month instead of that just being per week. So you're getting that resources timed for a fraction of what it would normally cost in the investment. Um, Leverage your specialized skills. They have valuable insights, not being part of your organization on the full time. They come in with fresh eyes. They can see things that you may not be able to see. Again, they have those partners and networks based on their years of experience. They bring in resources they can partner with to make sure that you're getting the services that you need in order to optimize your budget and keep your costs under control. So you're leveraging them just for those things that you need and not just for fluff. And there's also the mentality of, the shared services and collaborative models. A lot of nonprofits can work together, group together, work with government organizations. And the idea of a shared resources and collaboration model is you're not doing it by yourself. You're partnering with other organizations to share maybe a fractional resource between 2 and 3 or 4 organizations. And that resource is more dedicated, but it's supporting 3 or 4 of your similar peered organizations, and you're sharing that the cost of that resource across multiple funding streams, across multiple nonprofits, but you all benefit from that. So that's the idea of the fractional leader, and that's where it can really pay off in the technology and cybersecurity realm. So I'm going to be happy now to turn it over to Brian and talk and dive in a little bit more about cybersecurity. Brian, all yours.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Speaking of fractional sources and leveraging your dollar, cyber insurance is definitely one of those things that could do that for nonprofits. So we'll kind of go over what even cyber insurance is, kind of the drawbacks with it, and the tips and tricks and kind of best practice with engaging with the cyber insurance industry. So what is cyber, right? It's designed to cover consumers of technology services or products, which newsflash is basically any business or nonprofit in the 21st century here. It's a pretty dynamic insurance policy. So think of it as covering the financial loss or fallout in the event of, a breach on our authorized access, and typically private information like personally identifiable information like social security numbers, or personal health information, health records, or personal financial information like banking data. So when you have a robust cyber insurance policy at your organization, it has really 3 sections. So these columns here on this slide, and then the rows are what we call the insuring agreements. So first party is, I have a cyber insurance. I bought it for my company. For me, I need help. So, when there's skull bones on your laptop, you got hit with ransomware or something like that. The first thing you do is call 1-800-365 incident response hotline. That hotline is manned by a privacy attorney who acts as a data breach response coach to quarterback those efforts to respond to that incident. So that's your security breach expense. The second thing that will happen is they deploy IT forensics, right? Computer folks who can figure out how the bad guys got in, what data was taken. Was your incident truly a data breach? Because a breach is a legal term. Do you need to notify those individuals who were impacted? And maybe you have, a decade's worth of database of donor information, or maybe you're a community health center that's a nonprofit with health information, right? You need a specialized firm to actually call, email, and notify these individuals and the privacy attorneys to figure out, in how quickly you need to do it and in what matter. You could also be a sitting duck when there's a data breach, right? Where you can't access the technology you use to run your organization, or maybe you can't run it at the pace or the at the capacity you're used to. So cyber insurance can pay your business interruption or business income and extra expense. Maybe you have a key supplier, vendor you rely on that had a cyber incident. You could have coverage for that under contingent or dependent business interruption. Maybe you have to pay a ransom. You hope you don't have to, and you can restore from backups, but cyber insurance will pay a ransomware demand. It also could pay fines or penalties from regulators. Also pays for public relations specialists to kind of smooth things over with your current, patients, donors, customers, clients, vendors, as well as, hopefully avoiding, future ones to interact with your organization. It can pay to replace hardware or data. It also pay for a lawsuit from a third party, right? This other column here, the privacy liability, it has to do with PII, PHI, PFI. Virtually every nonprofit uses social media and their website and their posting. So there's this concept of content web publishing multimedia liability that kind of brings that libel, slander, defamation, intellectual property, copyright infringement, which is huge with kind of using AI tools right now, brings that into the 21st century under a cyber insurance policy. Very unlikely a lot of the time, but the security breach liability, information security, network breach liability, and I use all these terms because not every cyber insurance policy is the same from all these carriers. It's kind of the wild, wild west of the insurance industry. But this coverage is if your organization has a breach and it's so bad that because your organization got breached, your clients or vendors or third parties got breached, that's where that coverage comes into play to protect from lawsuits. Then, of course, cybercrime, right? You either voluntarily part with funds or funds are stolen. There's some sort of computer fraud or kind of crypto telecommunications fraud. There's been instances of threat actors getting into systems and using their computing power to mine for cryptocurrencies. And then, you look at your electric bill or, your utility bill weeks or months later, and it's, outrageous. So cyber insurance is incredibly dynamic. These are, most of the time folks are buying cyber insurance for access to these post-incident service providers we just talked about. These are just some names to give it some clarity. A lot of the law firms are out of Philadelphia. On the next slide, there's also pre-incident service providers. So all these cyber insurance carriers kind of compete with one another of cyber goodies, of things you don't necessarily have to have a breach to use. Might be a free hour-long, consulting, cybersecurity consultant phone call. It might be a little, training on phishing, security awareness. It could be kind of a database or kind of a resource hub of templates and tips and tricks for maybe like a bring your own device policy or a data breach response plan kind of template. Unfortunately, the data suggests 90% of policyholders don't take advantage of these. So, if you are a nonprofit or IT leader and you have budget season and things aren't getting approved, maybe you're already paying for some of these things. Take a look at if you have a cyber insurance policy, take a look at the pre-incident resources. So I'll give you a quick kind of lay of the land of the market here. If you take anything from this section of the presentation, cyber insurance market is soft as a marshmallow, which is good for buyers and businesses and nonprofits. So the capacity or the availability of carriers wanting to write this coverage is going up. The pricing is really soft, kind of going down. Coverage is pretty good. They're not, having too many crazy reductions in coverage. What's weird is the losses are still there. So it's kind of an artificial soft market. It's just, the new sexy thing in the insurance industry that's, we kind of learned a lot over COVID and made a lot of businesses put controls in place. So aggressive underwriting is happening right now. No presentation these days is complete without AI, so I'll mention it briefly. There are no AI exclusions baked into cyber insurance policies today. However, they are creeping up in other types of insurance like professional liability or directors and officers liability. So if you're, on a board of a nonprofit and your team is making decisions based off an AI output and that AI output is not accurate or hallucinating or guides you guys to make a poor decision, that's not in the best interest of the organization, it's possible your D&O liability insurance could have an AI exclusion. AI is both good and bad. The good guys, kind of the white hat hackers and cybersecurity folks of the world. AI is being embedded in their tools to help organizations, and which we really need because there's a huge skills gap of actual humans in cybersecurity. At the same time, the bad guys are definitely using AI to do a lot more and better, more sophisticated phishing attacks to just trick humans. So there was this huge funds transfer fraud that happened late in 2024. A financial controller gets on a call, just like the six of us are on right now, and she thinks she's talking to the CEO, and the CFO looks like them, sounds like them. It was completely AI spoofed, and she ended up wiring, I think, $25 million out the door. So kind of spooky. So what are the issues with cyber insurance? It's not a perfect, silver bullet. Um, it's really unfortunate. There's 40,000 independent insurance agencies in the United States, and less than 100 specialize in cyber insurance. So there's a big kind of talent gap, both in information technology, cybersecurity, and insurance. I blame it on, kind of low commissions and incentives and learning programs. My industry has not done a great job of being cyber risk advisors, and that's one of the things why I started Igloo here. Um, the whole process is really in control by the privacy attorneys. And there's a small amount of them that are panel providers with these cyber insurance carriers. So if you talk to any cybersecurity person, they all follow these NIST frameworks that say, hey, we need to identify cyber risk, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And the cyber insurance industry does a poor job at kind of, respond and recover and continuous learning and improvement. They kind of say, well, hey, the bad thing happened. We put you back in the place you were, no better. We're done here, which makes sense. That's why insurance exists. But that's another important reason why you need these kind of fractional leaders or in-house leaders who, are going to learn and improve further than what the insurance industry will do for you. As I kind of alluded to, there's a lot of market volatility in cyber insurance. I mean, sure, it's soft and it's a buyer's market right now, but the the way it works is you apply for coverage, you say, yes, we have all these controls, and there's no verification, no warranty. So if you either lie on accident or, you can switch the slide here, the application becomes part of the policy, and the policy is a legally binding contract, right? So you have to be very careful when you apply for cyber insurance. Often you're going to want to include some sort of managed service provider, IT person, or fractional resource to help you answer those control questions, which we'll go through briefly. But it's not a gotcha type of situation. These underwriters are just trying to mitigate risk. So you want to be as thorough as possible. If they ask you, hey, do you have MFA? Yes or no? And you're 80% to a yes, write all over that thing and tell them why, you have this, IT project to roll out, Duo or some sort of MFA product in the next, week or 6 months. So treat everything like fill in the blank, even if it's a yes, no question, and explain and describe any updates that have been performed, are being performed, or expected to be performed. If you renew your insurance July 1st and you have a big IT project that's going to kick off in September, let them know about it. Don't be like this manufacturer in Illinois who the CFO got the renewal application from Travelers 30 days in advance, and he said yes, we have all these things for MFA. It turns out they only had 2 of the 4, and when they had an incident, the carrier denied their claim. So you definitely want to avoid that. Next slide here. So if you're evaluating cyber risk, here's a couple quick ways I recommend folks to do it. There's all these cost of a data breach studies out there that say, hey, basically a cost to rectify a stolen record is between $100 and $300 a record. You can do kind of an IT asset inventory with an IT professional, figure out how many PHI, PFI, PII records you have, and multiply by that cost per record. Some of these carriers like Chubb have a free tool, Cyber Risk Index. We had a little bit more time. I could run through it with you, but you can plug in, hey, I'm a $1 million nonprofit. What's my cyber risk? And they will actually kind of mine 20 years of cyber claims data and give you some good information. Underwriters do use some tools called BitSight and Security Scorecard that kind of scan your external network. Take these tools with a grain of salt. But if you're scoring very poorly, on things like that, you likely won't get the best treatment from underwriters. Next slide, please. So a couple, things to look out for when you're buying a cyber insurance policy. We mentioned they're not all created equal. You might buy $1 million cyber insurance policy, but for that cyber crime, phishing funds transfer coverage, you only have $250,000 coverage or $100,000 of coverage. So you want to be mindful of that. You obviously don't want it to be zero. Ransomware and extortion. Unfortunately, cyber insurance has both a frequency and a severity problem where those quick, small cyber crime claims are kind of a death by 1,000 cuts, where the ransomware and extortion are the big kind of catastrophic claims. So carriers are starting to limit, the coverage for that. Either they're adding co-insurance or a sublimit, or some sort of exclusion. So you just want to double check that. Another one is neglected software. Actually, Comcast Xfinity had an incident about a year ago out of Philadelphia that basically these cyber insurance policies are saying, hey, if you know a known vulnerability, because these common vulnerabilities and exploits are tracked and monitored by the cybersecurity community and NIST, if you knowingly don't patch and update vulnerable software, we're going to slowly reduce your coverage over time. So I think Comcast got hit with like a 0-day vulnerability. They updated their software, I think, within a week or two. But say they had waited months and months and months, their cyber insurance could have gotten, cut from, say, $1 million to $500,000, or all the way down to zero if they waited like a year. Bricking or hardware replacement. Analogy I'll make for this is in car insurance, right? You drive a Honda Civic, you crash it, the insurance company is going to replace that with a Honda Civic, right? Not a Ferrari. Well, if you ever heard of Moore's Law, technology evolves so quickly that sometimes when there's hardware or a server or something that a breach is so bad it damages the hardware, that you have to replace that hardware, but you might not be able to buy a server from 10 years ago. So there's this carve back of coverage or some limit of coverage in cyber insurance where that bricking hardware replacement may be limited in nature, because insurance doesn't want to put you in a better place than you were before the bad thing happened. They want to try to put you in the same place. And then cryptojacking, right? These criminal organizations are stealing cryptocurrencies out of folks' wallets left and right. So another thing to be mindful of, and then they're hijacking computing power to mine for cryptocurrency, which can leave you with a big bill. I'll make a special attention to managed detection and response. And again, this is something, maybe a fractional resource would guide you through implementing this and vendor selection, all of that. But if you remember back in 2020 over COVID, the insurance industry came out and said, hey, we could have avoided, all of our claims, 80% of our claims had all of these, insureds had MFA in place. Well, now the cyber insurance community and carriers are saying, well, hey, we could avoid half these claims if they had just put MDR in place, managed detection and response, which is basically software that's used and actually has eyes on glass, cybersecurity teams somewhere monitoring the alerts that basically can detect, find, and monitor and respond to bad guys in your systems in real time. And that's why it's so effective, because the faster you can respond, the better. So you may have heard of, I don't know, Blackpoint, SentinelOne, CrowdStrike, Microsoft Sentinel. There's a Huntress. There's a lot of these providers out there, but they're giving discounts for it. So some quick tips, and we will open up for Q&A here in 5 or 10 minutes or so. So everyone always asks, well, how do they, rate my policy? Well, it's, what do you do? I'm a local, nonprofit. How big are you? $1 million revenue. What kind of data do you have? PHI, PFI, PII, and how much, right? Are you some hospital network with millions of, patient records? Or are you, a small, library or something? Have you had an incident? Yes or no? If you have, clearly a no answer is a good answer. But if you have had an incident, tell us what happened. Tell us how the bad guys got in. What did they take? When did it happen? how did it happen? How much money did you spend responding? Was it insured or not? Did the carrier spend money on the incident? Because believe it or not, a lot of carriers actually like writing business where somebody had a big data breach maybe a few years ago or a year ago or 2 years ago, because they know that business has learned their lesson and has strengthened their posture. And the last one we'll dive into a little deeper here is IT controls, right? It's really the only thing you can control to get preferential treatment from cyber underwriters. So we'll walk through those briefly. So I share this slide a lot. It's back from 2024, but it's still pretty relevant. It's kind of a traffic light: red, yellow, green. So this is as if an underwriter is looking at this. The bare minimum controls they're looking for from everyone is, do you have MFA across four places? Whether your employees work remotely or on site, they want it for email, network access, right? Your files and stuff like that. Privileged access, right? The finance and HR people who, kind of work with the crown jewels of the organization. And then IT administrator access, right? Whether that's, outsourced or in-house. So that's where they want MFA. They want you to have some sort of backups, some basic endpoint detection response, and some basic training for your employees. As you become higher risk or larger organization in terms of revenue and data, then they start saying, well, hey, you need, these fractional resources, a virtual chief technology officer or chief information security officer who's implementing things like, managed detection response that has a SOC, monitoring your network 24/7, 365, or, monitoring, who has access to which systems, kind of privileged access management, maybe a password tool where you're storing them in a vault. So all sorts of more advanced controls and requirements. So if you have an incident, here's some tips and tricks. Don't be afraid to call the insurance carrier if you do have a cyber insurance policy. There's something called a notice of circumstance versus filing a claim. So notice of circumstances: hey, insurance carrier, this bad thing happened. We're not really sure if it's a breach or, how serious it is. Sales guy leaves an unencrypted laptop in an Uber or something. But we just want to let you know because we don't want to be penalized for, telling you too late, because there is kind of a time element to this, right? You can't say, oh yeah, hey, we got hacked 2 years ago. Here's the bill. That's not really how it works. All of those post-incident service providers we talked about, the law firms, the credit monitoring, the forensics. If you have a favorite, your brother-in-law is your privacy attorney or something, you want to get those panel providers pre-approved when you either buy or renew the policy. You don't want to do that come claim time, because the carrier is going to say no thank you, or okay, we're going to pay 50% of their rates or something like that. Because the whole way it works is they've pre-negotiated deals with all these post-incident service providers to drive the claim costs down. You also don't want to panic and delete everything or shut everything off or call the IT guy down the road. You don't want to destroy any logs. It's a crime scene, right? If there's blood on the floor, you don't want to mop it up before you call the cops, right? It makes you look bad. Plus, the forensics folks can't do their job. They can't see how the bad guys got in if you destroy the logs in your systems. You want to act fast, right? You can kind of mitigate the loss of these the sooner you know, and the sooner start acting on it. If you have an incident response plan, do reference it and communicate with that team frequently. A lot of the times, folks will set up some sort of reoccurring phone call every 2 hours every day as these things progress. And then you want to be careful with the B word here, breach. Consider using incident or event when you're talking about it. Because again, breach is a legal term. So tips for cyber insurance buyers: obviously, you want to work with insurance folks who understand cybersecurity. You want to work with IT people who understand cyber insurance. You want to start early. It's getting a little harder to do this since COVID. The carriers don't, have the underwriting bandwidth they used to. But 120 days, 90 days, you want to avoid, the 30 days, from renewal game, because if you do have to implement some sort of IT control, it may take time to do that, and you want to know as soon as possible. Take advantage of those pre-incident loss services that may be offered by your current carrier. This is the number one tip, other than soft as a marshmallow. If you have a policy, you want to put that 365 24/7 incident response hotline in your cell phone. Um, two people at your organization should have it, because when these things happen, they happen, 4 o'clock in the morning, Black Friday shopping, you know, the threat actors, these hackers, they reveal themselves at the most opportune time for themselves and the least opportune time for you. So you may not have your company laptop or even access to your company's network or files or systems. So you want to make sure you have that phone number in your cell phone. Invest in IT controls, invest in processes and procedures. I think that's all we have. You want to go to the next slide? Oh yeah, just some quick questions. If you're evaluating an insurance professional, ask them if they have any sort of special education in cyber. Do they have a dedicated claims rep, a cyber practice group leader, any proactive services to keep you out of trouble? How many policies do they write, or what industries, or how large? Just trying to figure out, if they even understand some of the terminology here in information technology and cybersecurity land. Cool. So I think, Mike, you can open up the microphones to anybody who has a question. We'll stay on for maybe 5 or 10 minutes here, and if there are any, we'll shut it down and send the recording out to everybody.
Yep. So everyone, your mic should be enabled already, so you can unmute yourself, or you can drop it in the chat. Any questions? Again, yeah, we'll hang out for a minute or two here. What I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to stop the recording here in about 30 seconds, and that way you don't have to worry about your question being recorded. As part of this, though, I did, up here is Brian and my contact information. The one thing I'll add on to Brian's comments there is I sometimes get asked, is my organization too small? Like, I only have, fractional, even my nonprofit is maybe only has 1 or 2 staff, and then we have a whole bunch of part-time staff that support us, or I contract out the executive director or support of my nonprofit. In my opinion, Brian, you can correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't matter the size of your organization, you really need to consider and get that cyber insurance coverage, because it doesn't matter how big or small you are, anymore. The bad actors are going to be coming after you. They're equal opportunists at this point. But Brian, in my mindset, you're never too small.
Yeah, and they prefer the small fish because they often can lead them to bigger fish, and they have less defenses. They're easier to get into. You can often get $1 million of cyber insurance for maybe $1,000 a year if you're a small nonprofit. You don't have you have decent controls and don't have too much data. One thing I don't know if I really hit this point home, though, is say your nonprofit does have an incident and you have a board, and it's determined, the board didn't do their, due diligence as it relates to cybersecurity and cyber insurance. We have seen claims where basically a cyber incident turns into a director's and officer's liability claim because, hey, you guys didn't consider fractional resources or didn't consider cyber insurance, or, dropped the ball when it came to cyber hygiene, and it gets messy. So.
Okay, great. Thank you, Brian. Again, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording here in about 2 seconds, and we'll open it up to questions so you don't have to worry about your question being recorded. 1 second to stop.